Imagine finding a suitcase that reconnected you to your forgotten roots. That's what happened to Dominique King, who discovered a collection of mementos from her ancestors in Mexico. Dominique used Dropbox to save, document, and organize photos, recipes, and other irreplaceable family treasures for generations to come. For every keepsake worth remembering, there's a story worth sharing. What story will you share? Learn more at dropbox.com/things worth saving.
Welcome to Scary Story Podcast. Do you feel safe in your couch? Today's stories might make you rethink. My name is Evan. Here is a scary story. I want to say I flicked the cord a bit off my back. That sounds wrong. I'm sure to get fired. Poor child took a step back and tripped on a piece of plastic block that another one of the children had been working on. What type of store, she said, where the blocks were actually fruits or something like that. The kid took a few more steps backward before falling. I have to admit, it was a little funny, but only a little funny, to see it happen. Feeling of the warm caress raised the back of my head, with the occasional surprise of finding drool or booger stuck to my hair, something I desperately tried to get away from. But I worked hard for this, and paid well. This was no time to quit. I was the lucky one out of the group with deployed to the daycare center next door. I had somehow
The weak fear the shadows.
Fear controls them.
when Marcella quit, I was forced to take some of her while they found a replacement. And I wished with all my heart that they wouldn't get used to me after they found out that I was free.
On my wings.
I usually spent watching TV and eating microwavable food. I wanted my nights to myself. It was weird meeting the parents of the little kids and how different the couples were between one another. Yet it explained every single characteristic of the child. Bridget, for example, one of the most frail and emotional children in the center, had a mother who was soft-spoken and looked about as weak as the trees they planted in the front lawn, still with the sticks tied with rubber bands to the skinny trunk of the newborn tree to help guide them. I'm still not sure if trunk is even the right word. Though I shouldn't be making fun of parents, I mean, it was way too easy, and as my best work friend says to me, it is beneath me. She was one that showed me the ropes when I first started working, and since then, she has met my family when they came to visit, has picked me up from the airport, and has even helped me move. I guess I should stop calling her my work friend. She got me a good deal for a car recently, also, when my old metal bucket with wheels refused to start on the side of the highway for the 10th time. But anyway, I was saying, she did her best to keep my sarcastic comments around the kids and parents down to a minimum. It worked about half the time. One of my go-to phrases was that I should have stayed in school. Parents meeting. I felt guilty after saying it, especially at work. I knew it offended some of my coworkers. With the exception of Francine, my best work friend. Treating the job as a punishment wasn't the best thing to say. Those kids, I tell you, they were something else. I'm close to quitting though. Surprisingly, it had nothing to do with the job itself. You see, I was leaving work around 9 p.m. We had new cleaning protocols and it took just under an hour to get everything cleaned up and ready for the next day. And yes, just above my car, as I was forced to park out on the street. The place had its parking, but it was reserved for the parents to arrive to pick up their kids, sort of a drive-thru. We still would get out of the car, and the place would get jammed up either way. I could hear my own footsteps dragging against the cement sidewalk while I was scrambling to
Ooh, spooky.
gum wrap without taking everything else in my hand.
Spooky.
Sometimes I dropped them, doing just that. Earlier, I walked up to the driver's side of the car and heard a footstep coming up behind me from across the street. Miss? I heard a man's voice. My hands started shaking as the car keys rattled in my hands, desperately hoping that this wouldn't be something like what happens in the movies. That part when the character drops them and then they get murdered. I felt the car lock disengage and I pulled it open and jumped inside. I picked the right key to put in the ignition on my first try and the car started smoothly. Well, compared to my old car. That's when a man waved at me and put his hands
That's
back
a
on
pretty
his lap
sick
as he
Kendrick
approached me.
skin.
Miss?
Oh.
He showed me his empty hands. When he lowered them, I caught a glimpse of his beard in case I needed to remember this to explain it to the police. Brown jacket, average height, striped button-up shirt. I stepped on the gas and got out of there, looking carefully at the rearview mirror. The man hunched over and put his arms to his side, across the street back to where he came from. I was still so nervous, I skipped my visit to the 7-Eleven and kept driving down the highway. The roads were empty as I thought about the encounter. I released some of the grip I had on the steering wheel and hadn't noticed I had tensed up completely, afraid to even blink.
Let's get it, let's get it, let's get it, let's get it, let's get it.
Person disappeared with their picture and everything, followed right by a bad drawing of a suspect and then interviews with people who knew me. Knew the victim. My eyes started twitching, but soon my thoughts went back to the daycare once again. Relieved to finally be able to go home, took a deep breath. I could feel the tiny hands of one of the kids on my shoulders, attempting to climb up on top of me once again.
30 seconds until minions spawn.
It felt so real. I got goosebumps.
The cycle
Looking back at the rearview mirror once again as I got to the garage of my apartment, I saw no headlights, no movement, no man with a beard with a large knife or a gun by his side. I was safe. The next day, I showed up in the afternoon for another evening shift, overlapping briefly with Francine,
Minions
thankfully,
have spawned.
when I got to tell her about the creepy man from the previous night. She was visibly nervous, as I knew she watched and listened to a ton of true crime shows. Even though she suggested that I report it to the police, she eventually came back to reality and said to keep my phone on me and to walk with somebody when it was time for me to go.
life.
She asked me to call her and stay on the phone with her that night when it was my turn to go, which I did. There was nobody there though. I made sure to park the car a little closer to the center so I wouldn't have to walk too far by myself. Over the phone, Francine said something strange. From nowhere, she asked if I was back at the daycare center, or where I was.
Snuff out the fire.
Silly, I said. I'm in the car. Why would you ask that? You know I try to get away from that place every single day of my existence. She laughed and stayed silent. What's wrong? I started to ask. And she shushed me right away. What? I asked, and then she just shushed me one more time. Do you hear that? She asked. Faintly, yes. Faintly I could. The sound of one of the kids laughing. My arms
That was
went cold
creepy.
when I recognized the voice. And my ears throbbed to the rhythm
Kids'
of my
laughs are creepy, man.
blocking out the sound of the laughter was
They're
there.
creepy.
I felt the pressure against the back of my seat as something hit me non-stop. I pulled over to the side of my empty highway,
Better stop.
sure that there was somebody
You
hiding.
better
in the back.
stop with this dashing, young man.
Francine's call got cut off by accident in the commotion. She was calling back just as I was looking for the button to turn on the flashlight feature on my phone, just to add to my frustration and paranoia. I answered her call, placed her on speaker, and turned the light. I got close to the car, shining the light at the back seat. Door area. I finally got the courage to open the back seat door to look under it. There was nobody there. Everything all right? She asked, sounding angry with me for some reason. The car wasn't empty, so I got back in the car and locked my doors. Yes. Everything is all right.
Yeah, this is how insecure this part is. Starts door shield, bone plating.
It's really cool to see how
Like,
someone would notice if I disappeared for a couple of days. Ever since I moved to this city, I've been worried about just that. Everything went smoothly until right by the end of the shift. About half an hour after the last kid was picked up and we were cleaning up. I looked at the tables and through the windows and noticed
so annoying, dude.
the silhouette of a man coming up towards the building. I ran to the door to lock it and yelled out for Francine. She was on her way to grab the keys for the key. She dropped it and she went
You
towards
dead.
He's outside. Francine looked out the glass door and froze in place. Seeing I caught her, expecting her to move. To my surprise, she reached for the doorknob and unlocked it. Didn't know what to do. I debated going over to her to pull her away from the door and yell at her for doing such a dumb thing to her. Then I saw her do something else. She swung the door open as a man with a beard and a brown jacket stepped up to her. His eyes turning toward me as he spoke. Henry, Francine finally said to me. It is Henry. I looked toward him.
What up, Star? How you doing, man?
He did look a little familiar to me.
See that play?
I see no harm in asking, Francine told
I
me.
need a bag,
I
but
mean,
it's an
stepping back
awkward
toward me.
situation we're in.
Harm in asking?
But he's not
Looked at both of
pushing,
them.
so get a free bag.
Henry broke the silence with a sob. I can rebuy the car from you, he said. Please. I need it back. Francine helped explain to me what happened.
Man, this is how insecure this player
It was
is.
the father of one of our
He went
kids who stopped
bone
coming to the
plating
center after an
and
accident.
door shield. As
Eventually,
you
he passed
also
away.
will.
But Henry
Kinda
wanted to
crazy.
buy my car. Buy it back, apparently.
Kinda crazy.
Francine told me how he was the owner of the car that I had bought. And that Henry had sold it to make ends meet after losing his job and the grief he experienced after the loss of his son.
And now he's freezing
Henry
away,
interrupted
dude.
with a burst of tears,
What a
sobbing
lame
over
on,
words as
man.
he mentioned how special the car was to him and his wife.
You're actually lame as shit.
Trips and photos they took with little Mike. Photos he had outside the car on his first day of preschool. Yes, I told myself. Of course I let him have the car back. I had no idea. He told us about the songs Mikey used to like to listen to in the car. The way he remembered even the most mundane things of his family road trips and even running errands. I looked over to Francine as she wiped away her tears. Thank you, he said, calming down on his own. And Mrs. Tantrums and his
This man playing like the biggest
It'll be
bitch
okay.
in the
I close
world.
my eyes and I hear his laughter still. He kicked at the back of my seat on the way home in the evenings. I hated being in the car with him.
An ally has been slain. You are slain an enemy.
Ah! Lame. Lame.
It was late and I was starting to worry. Girlfriend started picking me up from work because my car was in the shop and it had been there for about a week. I was still worried about her driving around late at night. I was out of my job at 1 in the morning, but I had somehow managed to end my shift early and leave at 11. So it was early for me. To make matters worse, the area where I worked was not the safest. Lots of factories and processing plants nearby. The area was a hot spot for criminals.
Yeah,
For those
man.
unfortunate ones who were forced to live in their cars.
I don't know
for the
nothing
most
about
part.
it. Pretty dumb.
Were usually the victims of this bad.
Yeah, I miss the cannon.
I was chased at one point, and I thought that riding my bicycle.
Cause he can just like
was a good
spam
idea.
his Q now.
I had first-hand
Kind of
experience.
nuts.
Tried
Kind
all
of
of
loony.
this. My girlfriend agreed with a smile, like she always did. She kept all of the doors locked and made sure to check her tires and stuff before doing the 15-minute trip to where I worked.
Kind of loony.
We joked about the passenger side door and how it didn't open from the handle. Someone from the
I
inside
know this
opened
man ain't freezing again.
it. Ended up
This
calling
is
her
the
an
biggest
accidental security
bitch
feature.
in the
Still,
world.
she was known to me and her friends as fearless,
An ally
going through
has been
sketchy
slain.
areas, and was not afraid to talk and cuss at strangers, especially those who found it easy to bother a pretty girl all by herself in a car. Something felt off that night. I had been waiting for about 15 minutes
An
already
ally has
when I
been
stepped out
slain.
into the parking lot area to take a look at the streets. I saw no cars.
Enemy killing
I heard no
spree.
movement. I saw absolutely zero signs of life. I looked to the other side of the street and it was the same thing. And I looked behind me when I heard a car door closing. It was one of the guys from Built-In Industries coming out of his car. Poor guy. I knew the feeling when your break is over and you have to run back to scan your bag. Worse. I grabbed the area of the pocket of my pants, checked for my cell phone, and then took it out of there. No missed calls, no text messages. Had she forgotten to come get me? Her name popped up on my recent calls list, and I was just about to tap on her name when I saw headlights out into the distance. I let out a sigh of relief as I ran back to the empty security booth to pick up my backpack, leaning on its door. Then I ran back to the computer. I saw her face inside the dark car. Probably from looking at her phone, where everyone had begged her to protect and drive. She ended up with a broken door. She looked over to me and smiled nervously when I stepped out into the street. I noticed something move in her back seat. I looked immediately in that direction and scanned the area behind her seat in the passenger side.
Oh, from downtown.
Anything at all. I looked back at Britney
This
Spears.
Yasuo was the biggest bitch on the planet, bro.
Straight ahead.
Biggest bitch on the planet.
I reached for the passenger side door.
Door
and grabbed
shows
it
bone
and
playing
just like that.
freeze so he can get
It opened.
his jungler to game.
That's when it hit me. There's no way this is her car. The door handle had been broken for years, and when she dropped me off, it only opened from the inside. I leaned my head down to get a closer look at her as she turned her head away from me. Was that a tattoo on the side of her neck? I took a step back, and then another. I felt dizzy, and with a sudden urge to throw up. The sound of the backseat door opening made me open my eyes wide, but I couldn't get my legs to react in time. I could see a person with dark pants and black shoes stepping out of the car. I looked around as I felt my world spinning in shock as I tried to understand what was happening. Just then, I saw another set of headlights approaching in the distance. Without warning, the car right in
This
front of me
Yasuo was
started
the
speeding
biggest
away. This
bitch.
time, my legs reacted.
The
I started running to
biggest
try to catch up to her.
bitch.
My girlfriend was in trouble. My heart was beating so fast I thought it would jump out of my chest. I then heard the familiar double honk from behind me. I saw my girlfriend's face through the windshield as she waved at me. Dazed, I walked over to her car. Hey weirdo, hop in. Not noticing how freaked out I was. She asked me why I had been so quiet during the ride home. I chose not to tell her. I never found out what happened.
Man, whatever, man. Fuck this game.
Enemy killing spree.
Fucking biggest ass bitch ever, bro.
As promised, with those in the email, newsletter, and social media, this episode contains an additional story. It's coming up right after this.
Angie's List is now Angie. Summer is the perfect time to book your next home project. From lawn care to new patio, Angie makes it simple to connect with pros who can get the job done right. See reviews, upfront pricing, and instantly book hundreds of projects. Plus, when you book and pay through Angie, we'll cover your project up to the full purchase price, plus limited damage protection. Check out Angie.com, and for more on the happiness guarantee, go to Angie.com/happiness-guarantee.htm.
Have you ever tried installing a security camera in your house or apartment? The wires, the brackets, the screws. It's a mess, and it takes half your day. And if you rent, good luck convincing your landlord that the holes you drilled were a necessary improvement. That's why the Bodyguard's 360 security camera was so awesome. The camera rotates to give you a 360-degree view of the room, so you only need one camera to eliminate blind spots that you might get from other cameras. You can set it up in seconds because it doesn't require wires or brackets. And keep an eye on all your prized possessions all day long.
Whatever, dude.
I can see what's going on in my home whenever I want no matter where I am. You can get up to $30 off the camera by going to bodyguards.com/truecrime. It's a little tricky.
I'm over this game, man.
That's BODYGUARD.com/truecrime.
Over it.
Use promo code TrueCrime and
This
get
boy
$30 off.
being the biggest bitch on the planet.
It was getting late, and one of the only places that
I just got a ridiculously that I can't
that's what we bought.
get
The actual
down.
parking lot to the beach was
An
closed.
ally has been
Cars
slain.
made a habit out of parking around it, right outside of the gates and along the street where the sand was. So that's what we did most of the time. It was becoming somewhat of a routine sitting and eating in the car, talking about random things while listening to the waves crash out into the vast darkness of the ocean. This beach was packed during a very specific time of the summer, usually near the end. And that's what we didn't think about when we spent almost 20 minutes looking for a parking spot. We finally found one farther down the road and close to one from home. There were 3 of us in the car, but our buddy Jeff was always on his phone and he didn't really talk much. We always forgot that he was there. Anyway, we started eating and talking about random things, and before we knew it, the fog started rolling in, and all we could do was hear the waves crashing against the rocks and some chatter off into the distance of those who had gotten out of the cars. Usually nobody got rowdy around there. It was so unusual to hear so much laughter and
So
yelling coming from
fucking
behind them.
annoying, man.
We simply blamed it on the last weeks of summer, and
fucking
soon
annoying.
we didn't even notice it. It was the silence that we noticed, however. We never quite figured out when everything was quiet. Even the waves took a break for a couple of minutes. And Jeff, in the back seat, suddenly jumped up toward my seat on the driver's side and held on to the headrest. Did you hear that?
Your
Yeah.
turret has been
He was in a
destroyed.
panic. We asked him what he was talking about, but that's when we saw a shadow pass directly on my side of the car, from the back to the front,
Enemies dominating.
disappear into the fog in front of us. No other cars in front of us. The figure was moving too slowly and smoothly to be a runner or a cyclist. Plus, the thing was completely silent. Scott, who was right next to me, was freaking out and he asked me to start the car and to get out of there. I was shocked that everyone else was panicking except for me, so I swear I get scared with just about anything. So I started the car when I saw a pair of headlights and a bright light aimed at my car from behind me. Then over a loudspeaker, I heard the strong, "Turn off your vehicle." It was the police. An officer shined his flashlight, aimed right at Jess, and then right on my face as I lowered my window. "Is everything alright?" he asked. I replied with a nervous yes. Then he asked what we were doing, but he found a Taco Bell bag and hot sauce packets. So he walked to the hood of the car without expecting an answer. I don't know why I get nervous around cops when I didn't do anything wrong. He walked over to Scott's side of the car and asked him to lower down the window. When he was rolling it down, the police officer became startled and shined his flashlight off to the side of the road, with rocks and sand. "You all alone?" he asked me. "Yes, us." He looked concerned and stepped back from his car. We all saw it. Jack hanging up on the rock, right to the side of our car. Straight into the officer. He quickly turned around and shined the light toward it. We all sat there, nearly shaking, unsure of what we should have been doing. ran straight toward our car again and asked us to roll up our windows and leave. He was surprisingly cool about it when he said it. He told us that weird things had been happening right where we were parked, and he had gotten several calls about it. Jeff likes to say that he heard the officer call for backup when he tells the story. I don't remember that happening. I do remember, clear as day, was that as I was pulling away from the parking lot, I looked over to the right just as we were passing. Fog only let me see what was right in front of me, beside me. That's how I was able to see the flickering light on the side of the road.
An enemy is
We got closer.
legendary.
I saw the shape of a wooden cross against the ground. Candles. Flowers. Stuffed animals. And pictures.
Your turret has been destroyed.
Someone had died there. What did you think about this? Let me know. Requests for additional stories came through our Discord community and Instagram. As long as you're listening, I'm happy to write additional stories and share them with you on here. I read every single request. Scary Story Podcast is produced by me, Edwin Covarrubias. You can get notifications on new episodes by tapping the follow button on the app you're listening on, or by entering your email over on scarystorypodcast.com. Until next time, thank you very much for listening.
Imagine finding a suitcase that reconnected you to your forgotten roots. That's what happened to Dominique King, who discovered a collection of mementos from her ancestors in Mexico. Dominique used Dropbox to save, document, and organize photos, recipes, and other irreplaceable family treasures for generations to come. For every keepsake worth remembering, there's a story worth sharing. What story will you share? Learn more at dropbox.com/things worth saving.
Welcome to Scary Story Podcast. Have you ever seen something that was never supposed to be real? Let's explore the creepy story of a local myth, and the tale of Mrs. Silver and her problem. My name is Edwin. Here is the Scary Story. When I first arrived to the house rental, I was amazed by how close the river was to the house. The river, surrounded by tall trees, was something out of a scene of a book. I gladly accepted to take up the empty room in the house. There's one thing I should have paid attention to. I asked Bill, the owner of the house, about the food. He was one of those regular expats, people who leave their country to settle down somewhere else. Typically, the retired workers looking for something a little more peaceful and caring. Bill fit the description perfectly. A man from Australia who bought a house to live in and another house to rent.
Your turret has been
Both
destroyed.
right next to each other.
Your turret has been
He
destroyed.
told me that there was an outdoor food market, a short walk along the river. There was a good chicken place around the corner. That was all there was. For the next few weeks, I simply started to staring to go a little farther down the road. Telling the few people I knew that I wanted to try new food. I knew I was secretly hoping to find a really good burger, something more familiar. The search worked. Soon I found a man with a cart that sold chicken on a stick. Right. Then I found a place that sold fish soup with sides of banana juice. Eventually I found salad, fried rice, and my friends back home all asked me why I simply didn't cook things at home. But I did. I learned to make lots of things while I was at that place, but cooking for one was boring real fast. Dirtying up all the pans and plates, spending an hour for something I could have picked up in 5 minutes. That's the way I just But I still cook breakfast and lunch sometimes. I have to say, I started cooking at home a lot more after an experience that I still can't determine while I was living there. And around 7 or 8 of the evening, I start smelling the scent of charcoal in the air. Whenever I cook outside at a barbecue or bonfire, it takes me right back to those days. Mountains get rainy. I moved back on the rainy night and walked along the never finished or progressed the entire year I spent there. Nothing of the skewers roasting over fire, the smell of those potatoes and chopped parsnips. But along with those thoughts, I also get vivid reminders of the night walks to grab a snack, the reason why I started believing in otherworldly entities. It was an alarm, more of a beeping sound coming from an empty building of about 5 stories, maybe to keep burglars out. But it would beep following no specific pattern at all. When it beeps and the sound of my boots against the gravel and dirt was the only accent against the sound of the river.
Enemy double kill.
Strange walking around there in pitch black darkness. But the only way to know that the river was there is to take out your earphones. Those beeping sounds were annoying. And I often wondered how people were able to live with it, beeping all night. I couldn't really hear it from my room, so that was a plus. Whenever I stepped outside, there it was. I'm not sure if any of you do this, but there are certain things that I find haunting and calming at the same time. Night walks are one of them. So I was stepping into an abandoned place, looking at pictures of foggy forests and abandoned cabins. Being in a new place with lots of things to explore gives me that chance to set my thoughts straight. This one night, I didn't know exactly what I was doing. I was deciding between a man who sells fresh fries and fresh sausage and bowl, and the restaurant that sells roasted chicken and again, fries. People love fries. So I was excited when I saw a woman walking along the river with a huge basket by her side. I was close enough to see that she was not walking very fast, far enough so that I couldn't see the shape of her head. I had seen women with those baskets. They usually sold these cheese sandwiches. They would also give you a cup of coffee with it if you asked. So I picked up my step to get closer to her and maybe grab myself one of those things from her. She turned the corner. She was hunched over. With beard and hair. And she dragged her shoes against the dirt across the kitchen. For dinner again wasn't that bad, I remember thinking, the intentional impact of the dirt patch on the river. That's when I noticed something else. The woman's silhouette stopped moving as I stood there. The shadows at the corner of the street that led to places that I hadn't explored before. I thought she was about to set up shop here, wait for customers to try her sandwiches. But across the street, and she tapped the pockets of her hands to check the coins. The woman hunched even more and walked across the street. I could hear her leather shoes against the gravel and she stepped away until she stopped suddenly. And as I got to where she used to be, she would have been 2 or 3 steps away. The sounds of her footsteps simply stopped. I didn't see her around the corner. I was expecting her to be there, to see that woman in her basket standing right there. Sandwiches ready in their paper wrappers. But no. There was nobody there when I got to the corner. I looked around briefly before crossing the street and continuing straight. It was still on my mind when I grabbed a plastic bag with a bowl of fries to take back home with me. As I got to the end of the street and close to where I was staying, I looked back to the road, wondering who that old woman had been when she was going. Been afraid of me? Never asked me that. I should have found her. Not long after sighting of that woman, I asked one of the waitresses at a coffee shop about what the woman with the basket as well. She said that people didn't do that anymore. They used to sell cheese fries and other bread. Asked me why. I explained what happened with me and the woman walking along the river. When she heard my story, her eyes opened wide as she called some of her other co-workers.
They were lost.
She asked me what she was like and where I had seen her exactly. That's when they told me about the old tale of the headless lady from the river. The story of the old lady who made her rounds selling up and down the street by the river when the town was developing. Until one day, while reaching for change in her bag, she tripped on her roots and broke her neck as she landed on the river. The fish feasted on her wrinkles and her eyes and her ears, until there was nothing left. She is said to roam through her old familiar places.
An enemy has been
Sometimes gets
slain.
lost in the streets of the mountains. The next story is called Mrs. Gilbert. It's coming up right after a quick message from sponsors that help make this show possible.
Angie's List is now Angie. Summer is the perfect time to book your next home project. From lawn care to a new patio, Angie makes it simple to connect with pros who can get the job done right. See reviews, upfront pricing, and instantly book hundreds of projects. Plus, when you book and pay through Angie, we'll cover your project up to the full purchase price, plus limited damage protection with our happiness guarantee. Check out Angie.com, and for more on the happiness guarantee, go to Angie.com/happiness-guarantee.htm.
Is something getting in the way of your happiness or with you achieving your goals? BetterHelp can assess your needs and match you to your own licensed professional therapist to connect with in under 48 hours. Safe, private, and convenient professional counseling, not self-help. You can send a message to your counselor at any time and get thoughtful responses. Plus, you can schedule weekly video and phone sessions. You don't have to sit in uncomfortable waiting rooms anymore. Now you can talk with licensed professional counselors who are specialized in depression, stress, anxiety, and more topics right from your home. Anything you share is confidential. Just remember that this is not a crisis line. If you'd like, you can check out the testimonials posted daily on their website. So many people have been using BetterHelp that they are now recruiting additional counselors in all 50 states. And I want you to start living a happier life today. As a listener of Scary Story Podcast, you'll get 10% off your first month by visiting betterhelp.com/scarystory. Join over 1 million people taking charge of their mental health. Again, that's betterhelp, HELP.com/scarystory. Mrs. Hilbert and her husband used to live right next door to us before she moved away to a care facility by the edge of town. I heard it was a nice place, so she asked me to go visit her through tears when she said goodbye to my parents. Even though we felt bad for her, she still gave me the keys. It was 8 or 9 when I was asked to give her the box of cookies that she ordered from the catalog. I was terrified of that house. My mom still made me go and knock on her door. I still remember walking up the steps of the porch, going around the lady's and potted plants along the steps, waiting for wind chimes dangling in front of me,
Double kill.
then leaning against the box that she kept next to her front door as I waited for her to open it. It was a struggle for her even back then, getting to her front door. It wasn't because she was unable to move or had a disability, because she had stacks of boxes, random items, piles of old newspapers all around the inside of her home. Her husband was frustrated whenever my family bumped into her. Mrs. Hilbert was always smiling and bringing us things. I took the box of cookies to her. She looked at the box and smiled, then asked if I was going to throw the plastic bag away, the one I used to bring over the box before I sat down. I told her that I didn't know. Just like that, she snatched it from my hands and asked me to say hi to my parents for her. And she disappeared back into her mountain of stuff.
Your
Left the front
inhibitor
door
is
open.
respawning soon.
Figured she was simply going to come back out. Mrs. Hilbert had a problem. She had too many things. We grew up next to her, and one time I asked my parents about what was wrong with Mrs. Hilbert. Mom explained that she was sick, and that she would get help on her own, and everything would be okay. I remember her yard being somewhat clean, compared to what it looked like now. She had lots of children's toys also, like that shiny red wagon that I always wanted to use. Instead, I saw it grow rusty as the years passed, and even more things seemed to accumulate around it. At one point, she had a waiting pool. She had a scooter, a couple of swing sets. It was incredible. For some strange reason, Mrs. Hilbert seemed to grow happier. Mr. Hilbert started to look sick and angry. Mom used to tell us not to ask too many questions and to let people be themselves. We just sort of ignored the things that people are doing outside. Mrs. Hilbert walked out with her enormous 19-inch hairnet. Going to the found boxes that you just knew would live forever. Later brought you even more boxes. It was years later, and I was about to go to college. Everything became too much. Some city officials took note of her home. They had warned her about her garden. I had been outside when they came out and told her that she needed to clean out the front yard and face a citation. She didn't get angry or anything. She simply smiled and apologized. As she was walking back to her house, she looked at us completely embarrassed. She got hurt what he told her. She shot at her shy, excited smile. The next day, she had a gardener come and take some weeds and clean out the trees and stuff like that. I stopped seeing her around the front of her house. Again. Stopped seeing her husband as well. The lights would come on again. The blue light from the television would be visible through the cracks of the spaces between the glass of the window, and the stacks of boxes and clothes that she kept against her walls. She was in there. You see the grocery delivery service unload the boxes of frozen meals and wheels. Her husband's car started glowing spider-webs between the side view mirrors of the car doors. Dust was caking on the hood and the roof of it. Theories about what they were up to crazy about the day. He started off by saying that he had gone out for a vacation after being sick and tired of Hilbert's messy house. We came up with stories about him finding another job, him being eaten, which got a lot of laughs. And what actually happened was worse than anything we could have come up with. It was 9 in the morning when a police car pulled up to Mrs. Hilbert's home. And then another car, with people dressed in hazmat suits, entered her living room along with a man with rubber gloves, a face mask, a camera, and a big picture. We were in there for several hours as more and more neighbors started gathering outside by the curb and our side. Mrs. Hilbert came out and stood by the stack of boxes, her hands covering her face. The red fire truck pulled up with calm firefighters with a saw and other heavy tools. We broke one of the windows and threw some of the boxes out. Mrs. Hilbert only stopped shrieking and crying when she saw what she was seeing. A gurney with a black bag on top of it, carefully being carried out by the window, but held by the firefighters. Mr. Hilbert had been dead for nearly 2 weeks when they came for him. A heart attack, we think. Someone from his work had alerted the authorities about his disappearance. Unable to get rid of anything. Hilbert had a problem. Scary Story Podcast is produced by me, Edwin Kennedy. Be sure to check out scarystorypodcast.com to sign up for free notifications of new episodes via email. Find out how you can get in touch via the link in the description of this episode for our Discord and social media accounts. Once there, you'll also be able to find official Scary Story Podcast shirts, hoodies, and stickers, and you can also find a link to my Patreon if you want to help support the show and get cool stuff at the same time. And also, don't forget to click follow right now on your podcast. Until next time, thank you very much for listening.
Imagine finding a suitcase that reconnected you to your forgotten roots. That's what happened to Dominique King, who discovered a collection of mementos from her ancestors in Mexico. Dominique used Dropbox to save, document, and organize photos, recipes, and other irreplaceable family treasures for generations to come. For every keepsake worth remembering, there's a story worth sharing. What story will you share? Learn more at dropbox.com/things worth saving.
Welcome to Scary Story Podcast. This episode is stories of entities that lurking about evil. One is a hospital, and the other is the area that's a bit more calming. So, my name is Edwin. Here is a scary story.
Hospitals haven't changed much since I was little, and at least not in that town. They still have the individual doctors setting up their offices after they go out to study in the city. The ones that are more attached to their family or to the place itself seem to...
Oh, shit. Oh, man. Oh, I hope he comes in here. Please come in here. Please come in here. Please, please. Please come in here. Make my day. They talk so much shit, yo. They talk so much shit and they got fucked. They got fucked. I had hella stuns on them. Let's play right here. I almost outplayed. Yes. What's up, Trev? Who are you? Oh, last game. Were you Kindred? That Lulu. That Lulu and fucking Yasuo must be fuming, bro. Oh my god. He was the most insecure Yasuo player I've ever played against. So insecure. Like, you already win the matchup pre-6 and you have to go bone plating and Dorn shield, and then you're gonna brag about your skill? Like, what? Thanks, man. You had some really clutch ults. Like, I know there was some, when we got Baron, you saved Nasus, which I was doing with the Nasus. That game was insane, man. I'm so glad we won because they talked so much shit. Hey, Knight. Trev was the Kindred. Talked so much shit, man. Oh, they talked so much shit. And then they said that I was being homophobic because I asked who was pitching and catching, because everything I said to Yasuo, he had something to say and Yasuo couldn't speak for himself. Like, that's not homophobic. I just say that's his boyfriend. I didn't say there's nothing wrong with that being his boyfriend. I don't have any problem with gay people. Yeah. Everyone just stopped talking when the game got super serious. They're like, "Oh shit, we're gonna lose. Oh shit, we're gonna lose some more." Yeah, that was a sick comeback. We were behind by, I don't even want to know how much gold we were behind. Probably. Yeah, 9K. I had some pretty good stuns there near the end, for sure. And then Nasus was just stacking Q all game. And I think the last fight, Yasuo actually threw it. Because he got in range of you. Look. Look. And then you try to get an ult off me. I flash out and stun him and kill him. I end up living somehow. Somehow I end up living. I had no health. Yeah. And then that was it. Crazy game, man. Crazy game. Insane game. Wait, I walked out with 100 out? Dude, there was so much going on that last fight. I didn't even notice if I walked out of it.
More of a dog person, huh?
Yeah, there was a lot of abilities going on. Cause I got Yasuo ulted. You said you Kindred him? Oh shit. Oh shit, you're right. But then again, you know, if I didn't E, you know, maybe Yasuo gets away and I lose.
On my wings.
It's a good game, man. Good game. Thanks for stopping by, Trav. Sitting on Thresh. Man, that game was crazy, bro. Crazy, crazy game.
Organic versus non-organic. Is there a difference? People ask me all the time if organic foods are really better, and the answer may surprise you. Organic foods have one big advantage, which is that they're grown without chemical pesticides. And spraying gallons of lab-made chemicals on your produce is not a great idea. So yes, while they sometimes cost a bit more, organic foods are better for you. However, one thing they are not is substantially more nutritious. Yep, that's right. Harvard University recently reviewed over 250.
Where to start this? Well, I guess I would have to begin by saying everyone in my family is sensitive to the paranormal side of things. Case in point, my sisters can hear the things that go bump in the night, while my father had a sort of guardian angel act as an early warning for when things are going to go bad. My mother never spoke about it to us, but her mother said she was sensitive too. As for me, well, I guess you could say I'm a sort of exorcist. I say sort of because the church
He's an
recognizes me
exorcist.
as the level of a deacon, meaning that I can hand out communion, but I can't give a sermon. This is probably why our family members are considered so strange, at least in a way. It isn't like we don't have friends or relationships. It is just that we don't perceive things the same as others do. Now, since that is out of the way, let's get into what happened. It was the middle of summer, so of course, the kids weren't at school, and a few of them thought it would be nice to stop at my place on their way to their vacation spot. I would go with them, but you have to be invited. Then again, I'm not sure if I can even take off work. A decent job is getting difficult to come by for an old warhorse like me. Well, I am renting a rather large house for just one person. The rent in this area is pretty cheap, as long as you don't mind the commute. I'm an early riser anyway, so it wasn't a big deal. Regardless, they all arrived a bit late, which gave me enough time to have everything ready for when they came in. They had been on the road for several days at this point. That wouldn't be so bad, except that there is no privacy on the road. That meant that everyone was a little pent up and needed to get some release from the drive. With the youngest kids, this simply meant letting them run around for a few hours, and of course, letting them swim in the pool. There was only one teenager, my nephew, at 14 years old. So we swam, but I could tell he just wanted to find one of the neighbor girls to hang out with. Too bad for him, the closest neighbor's daughter was leaving for college in the fall. With all this moving around, it was nice to let the parents swim and then relax with a few cocktails. I even turned on the jacuzzi for them if they wanted. So, all in all, it was a nice afternoon for everyone. Nothing from that could have prepared us for what was going to happen. It must have been close to midnight when we finally got everyone to sleep. You would think after burning so much energy, the kids would have crashed out early, but nope. I gave my siblings and their spouses the beds while their kids were split between two of these smaller rooms. Yes, it is a 4-bedroom, but that just meant that I had to crash on the couch. Nothing wrong with that, but it does make my sleep rather light. Though it was the summer, I woke up to a slight chill in the air. I may have had the fans running, but it shouldn't have felt that cold. I was about to go back to sleep when I saw something. In the reflection of the main window, I could see the shadow of someone walking across the living room. The only light silhouetting it came from the kitchen stove that I had left on in case someone needed something from the kitchen and they wouldn't have to turn another light on. This also put my side of the couch in complete darkness. Even if somebody looked into the reflection, they wouldn't see me. As I watched for a few moments, I realized that this shadow had a clearly female form to it, but something was very, very wrong. It almost looked like its hair was extremely tall, and it was carrying a backpack. What? I thought to myself as I gained more consciousness. That doesn't make sense. No one has their hair up like that unless they just got out of the shower.
Damn,
If they
man,
did,
damn,
they wouldn't have put on a pack. The seconds ticked by as I began to see it more clearly. It didn't walk, but instead it seemed to glide across the floor, as if it wasn't stepping on it. The hardwood floors didn't squeak. However, I should still feel the subtle changes of the floor with every step. But nothing. Silently, I watched as it went to the hallway where 2 bedrooms were. Once it was out of sight, I silently got up and I followed it. I looked down the hall just in time to see the very edge turn to the room that the kids were in. Okay, what the heck is going on? I silently said to myself as I got to the corner of the hallway. Looking around the corner, I could see that the door to the kids' room was almost completely open. The red light from the alarm clock showed enough for my eyes to see the first bed. There was my oldest niece, sound asleep, lightly snoring as I moved slowly into the doorway. When I turned to look at the other bed, my heart skipped a beat and my blood ran cold. There was someone, or maybe I should say something, standing at the foot of my nephew's bed. It was staring at him as he silently slept. With the little bit of light I could make out the silhouette of what it was. The form was clearly that of an adult female, and a well-developed one at that, but not overly so. The long hair that fell down her back flowed right up to a set of what looked like wings attached to its lower back, just above the pelvic bone. This was bad enough, but the stranger parts were the large horns that seemed to come out halfway between the hairline and the top of the head. These horns curled back, kind of like ram horns, but did not curl back up to the ears. I was in shock at the sight of this woman that I had never seen standing in my house, seemingly watching over my kin. After about a minute, I saw my nephew roll into his back, and that's when something odd happened. There was a sudden smell of perfume in the air. It was very subtle at first, but soon it became overwhelming. Now, something you should know about me is that I hate the smell of a strong perfume. In fact, too much perfume has made me end dates early. So the smell of this was not intoxicating as one might think, but more nauseating to me. Once the smell had permeated the room enough that I had to hold my nose to keep from gagging, she reached down and began to pull the covers off of him. Reaching down, she slowly pulled the covers down past his feet, exposing him to the night air. And then she began to move up slowly up his body. That's when I saw his eyes burst open and the fear enter them. I could see him start to struggle, but he was having trouble moving. From that point, she climbed onto the bed and began to hold him down by placing her hand on his shoulder, while the other pushed his hand down. When she moved her leg up to straddle him, I tried to stop her. That is, I tried. My body didn't want to move. It was strange, but my muscles didn't want to respond to the commands that I gave them. I was confused, as I feared I wouldn't be able to stop her. By now, I had figured out what it was. Even though the logical part of my brain fought me there was no denying the truth. What had come into my house for nefarious reasons? It was a succubus. Now I'm no spring chicken, so I know a few things about the paranormal. It doesn't hurt that I dated a witch before. Plus, I had a few tricks up my sleeve. It must have sensed my fear because it turned and looked at me, still standing in the doorway. I looked at it right in the eyes, and I could see those green eyes looking back at me. These eyes were not green like you would think, but a dark green like you would see on a tractor. She still had her human irises, but the rest of her eye was that deep green. As she looked at me, her hands continued towards my nephew's body, as though it was slowly putting a dry rub on a brisket. And then she did something that I will never forget. She smiled at me. The smile was not filled with shark teeth like some would think, but instead, an almost human smile. The kind of smile someone gives you when they have pulled one over on you, and you can't do anything about it. With sheer arrogance in her voice, she said to me, "You're next," as I saw her hand begin to go lower on my nephew. While this was happening, her body seemed to get more and more visible, as though she was becoming solid. Thinking fast, I needed to find a way out of the paralysis. I could have kicked myself for not realizing it sooner, but the perfume must be the reason. So, if it was a chemical reaction, then I have something for it. You see, I'm not the only one that can adjust their chemical composition, at least for a while. Think of it as adjusting your brain to push off the effects of being drunk. Many people can do it, but it is a very temporary solution, and the headache that follows is far from fun. Using this, it only took a few seconds for me to break out of the paralysis and be able to move freely again. I could see the utter terror in my nephew's eyes as she lifted her body in order to get on top of him. Sprinting from my position, I jumped onto her, causing us both to crash onto the floor. Being able to get her by surprise, I was able to take her back and get a choke on her. This proved difficult, as her horns prevented me from getting my arm into position, though I did get my other arm around her neck. Remembering my old training, I dug my heels into her thighs. It's a good thing too, because my training never covered how to do this when someone had powerful wings. She tried to pull my arm away from her neck, as she violently thrashed her wings. Her wings were so powerful that with each flap, we bounced and crashed around the room. Not training against people so thin, she was able to duck her jaw and bite down hard into my arm. So much I thought that she was going to take a piece out. And grabbing her ear, I pulled enough that she screamed and lifted her head to try and alleviate the pain. This just allowed me to reset my arm into her neck. I got her now, I thought, as I could feel her supple neck against my bicep muscle and forearm. The noise must have woken everyone up, because the lights flipped on as numerous people came running into the room. Cursing coming out as the children were picked up and rushed out of the room. My brother tried to help me subdue this thing, but the violent thrashing made that impossible. I suddenly found myself wishing I had told him where I keep my firearms besides the safe. That is when that thing truly got serious. She took her tail and it penetrated my skin. Now, I've been shot before, and I would rather do that 100 times over than experience the pain I went through at that moment. And then something happened I don't think she was really ready for. Instead of letting go, all my muscles tightened, making it nearly impossible for her to breathe, cracking her ribs, and I started cursing and using the Lord's name in vain. As I calmed down a little, I was just saying, "Oh God, oh God, oh God." And this made her begin to lose any strength she had. I'll admit I was in far too much pain to notice this until her body began to slump, and she retracted her tail. I looked at her and she looked at me in contempt, asking, "How could you have this power? You are no priest." I chuckled and told her that the army recognizes me at the level of a deacon. The hate in her eyes at that point could have stopped a herd of elephants. Moving my hand, not the one around her neck, to her forehead, I began to demand her name. Of course, she wouldn't give it, so on to plan B. I began to pray to God and Jesus to cleanse your lost child and to forgive her sins. Free her from these shackles of this form and bring her true faith as she enters your house. I continued as she began to thrash again, but this time getting weaker and weaker. This time, my brother was able to get a hold on her down, and as I reached the end of my prayer, she screamed out her name. I demanded her true name, and she looked at me with true fear for the first time. I placed my hand on her head and made the sign of the cross. This seemed to cause her even more pain, as I demanded her true name. After a few moments, she had finally said it. In truth, I expected it to be something impossible for me to pronounce, though it was surprisingly easy. I will not say it here, but I will say that before I let my grip loosen, I tested it out with a silent prayer. Her reaction was a jolt as though someone had just electrocuted her. And before releasing my grip, I used her name to command her to remain in her current form until I said otherwise. I picked her up and let her go, placing her on the edge of the bed that she was about to attack my nephew on. While my brother's wife and my sister patched me up, we inquired of the purpose that she had in this house. She answered calmly, as we finally got a really good look at her. Her body was like something you would see in a CGI model. Her proportions seemed to be slightly exaggerated, but not to a comic degree. Her tan and almost purple skin was flawless, minus the injuries that she had just incurred. Beautiful face, waistline to legs, and of course everything else. It would make even those most chaste men think of impurity. The horns, though similar to ram horns, were smooth to the touch and almost silky smooth like her hair. The wings, for being so freakishly strong, were rather thin and small given her size. I was having trouble figuring out how she could even fly with them. And then there is that dang tail. Though not very long, it was almost pure muscle. Just looking at it made me feel more pain, and I wanted to rip it off of her pelvic bone. She did apologize for her actions, but that didn't make me feel any better. I'm going to need to pick up a donut later to do that. After getting the entire situation, I had to restrain my sister from going after the creature with a kitchen knife. It was her son that was nearly attacked after all. Although, thanks to my brother's level-headed thinking, we came up with a better idea. Since she is a demon, we made a deal. She would protect the family from harm whenever possible, along with keeping other demons away. In return, the houses that the family lived in would become sanctuary for her. Though, she would have to make herself known to the family. She would not have to reveal herself unless she was asked by one of the family. She would only take from the family that which is freely given, and must repay with something of equal value. If another demon became a threat to her, she would simply need to bring us a name and we could aid her in protection from harm. In return, she could have free reign on attacking those who take advantage of the family. All in all, a good deal for both sides. Now, I wouldn't have made this deal without a little insurance. Since I know her name, I can call her back whenever I need to. Though it is a very bad idea to push the boundaries of a deal like this, I'll still keep it in my back pocket, just in case. When everything was said and done, she stood up and walked to me. I asked her if she was ready to seal the contract, and she was. For those that don't know, if you're going to seal a contract with a succubus, you need to exchange the fluids and, like an old letter, seal it with a kiss. Since she had bitten me, which I would need stitches for, we had covered the first part, and I gave her the quick kiss that she had wanted. I made sure not to linger in order to make sure I didn't fall under her sway. After this, we walked her to the back door and watched as she faded away, as she walked through the threshold. That was almost 10 years ago now, and she has protected us from several things. Things like my niece almost getting in a car wreck, or my brother almost missing out on his daughter's birthday due to his awful boss. Even helping my nephew find a good girl to date and eventually marry. She had even come to visit me when she needs to hide for a while, though I keep having to tell her to put on some clothes. Not that I mind, but I have very large windows in this house. I know when she goes after the bad guys in this town, and I can't help but smile. Though, I did have to laugh maniacally when she found out that an ex-girlfriend was planning on hurting me when social media became a thing. Nothing like a visit from a succubus or her incubus friends